Hi, I'm Rob Martinez, State Historian of New Mexico, and this is New Mexico history in 10 minutes. Look where I am. I'm at the Santuario de Chimayo in northern New Mexico. It's about 20 miles north of Santa Fe. Well, this is a very world-famous Catholic site, Catholic pilgrimage destination, and it's quite an amazing place. It's known around the world, and it's not just for Catholics. People of many different faiths come here, and it's just a brilliant and special place. I love coming here. It's been called the Lourdes of North America, but as my good friend Felipe Mirabal would tell you, actually, Lourdes is the Chimayo of Western Europe. Well, I want to tell you a little bit about this amazing place because it has quite a history. This little valley has been known to the Pueblo people, Tewa speakers, for centuries, and they knew this area first. In their language, it was Chimayo, and it eventually got Hispanicized to Chimayo. Well, people started to settle here once Santa Cruz de la Cañada, which is up the road, started to be settled. And it was a very lush place, a very safe place, relatively speaking. Spanish-speaking people started to come here in the 1700s from Santa Cruz de la Cañada, which is up the road. And they established themselves here, people with names like Martin, Romero, and they came here, and by the early 1800s, there was a family here named Abeta. Well, a man named Bernardo Abeta was a penitente who saw a light glowing in the earth, and he came here and he found a crucifix to Nuestro Señor de Esquipulas, and like a lot of pious legends in Spain, he supposedly took the crucifix to Santa Cruz de la Cañada. The next day it was gone, and they found it back in its resting place here. So he decided to build a little chapel here around 1810. By 1813, he wanted to build a bigger structure. He petitioned the bishop in Durango, Mexico, to build a chapel here. And so by 1816, there was the structure we see behind me right now. There's some speculation that this building used to be a penitente morada, a chapel that would house the local penitentes with their activities. But nevertheless, it became a place of worship and healing. There's a little hole there on the side of the chapel, a little pozo, where healing dirt can be found. Some people think it might have been a spring that dried up, and native people used to come here and get healing dirt, and then Catholics started to do it. So it's quite fascinating. It's an excellent example of syncretism, a blending of Native American spirituality and Roman Catholic devotion. So it's quite an amazing building, and it's fascinating too because it has that Spanish Roman Catholicism, Mexican Catholicism, Puebloan spirituality, and even a devotion from Guatemala that makes its way up to Durango, and then likely a priest in the early 1800s brings that devotion to Nuestro Señor de Esquipulas here. And on the inside, the crucifix on the altar is that same crucifix devotion from Guatemala. So this is a really fascinating place. In 1929, the Santuario was deeded to a group called the Spanish Colonial Art Society. They were made up of members of previous groups, one that was in charge of preserving mission churches. And in one day, the Santuario went from the family's hands into the hands of this group preserving Spanish colonial arts and into the hands of the Archbishop of Santa Fe. Again, that was 1929 when that happened. And the Santuario became part of the Archdiocese. In the mid-1900s, a man named Father Casimiro Roca from Spain came, and he was the priest here at the Santuario. And he And he himself became an institution over the years, preserving and promoting. I have one memory of Father Roca. I came here, I was visiting sometime in the 1990s, and I was in the doorway of the Santuario, and he said, "Ven acá, come here. Come here, I need to talk to you." So I said, "Sí, Padre." "Yes, Father." He goes, "I need you to carry the cross. Tienes que llevar la cruz, the cross." And I go, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, I need you to carry the cross in the procession for Mass." So there I was carrying the cross. I was Simon to his Jesucristo, and I got to carry the cross for Mass with Father Casimiro Roca. So that's just a little taste of the Santuario de Chimayo and this amazing area of Chimayo, New Mexico. So that's the Santuario de Chimayo in northern New Mexico. The main architects and authors of Catholicism in New Mexico were the Franciscans. They were in New Mexico since the 1600s, but by the 1780s, their influence was weakened when Governor Anza consolidated the pueblos and reduced the number of priests here in order to save the crown money. The Franciscans were subsidized and paid for by the crown and the church. This will mark the beginning of the end of Franciscan influence in New Mexico. By the early 1800s, which is the last phase of our colonial period, we see a shortage of priests because of this. There are less Franciscan priests being sent up here, which means that in New Mexico, what you see developing in the late 1700s and early 1800s is a folk religion, Catholic expression, spirituality, and a very close relationship to God that manifests itself through prayer and ritual, but also in cultural and religious expressions like santos and penitentes. These are ideas that will also lead to the notion that there were no priests in New Mexico in the early 1800s. That's not true. There were always priests here. There was just a shortage, and it was a bit of a rocky evolution away from Franciscan priests and into bringing in diocesan priests from Durango, Mexico, and other parts of northern Mexico. Another shift that happens is that under the Franciscan priests, local New Mexicans and Pueblo people, they didn't have to pay for sacraments like marriage or baptisms or confirmations, or tithe for that matter. They were encouraged to, and they did, but it wasn't something they were pressured to do. That will change when we see secular or diocesan priests coming in the early 1800s. And you'll see that those priests are not paid for by the crown or the Mexican government. And so New Mexicans who were never part of a wealthy area would have to tithe and pay for sacraments. They were used to bartering, paying with food or goods or animals. But then you see this shift away from that, and it creates a certain tension and pressure in New Mexico in the area of religion and society as well. We'll see later on this really comes to a head and manifests itself when we get our first bishop in the mid-1800s. But I want you to keep this in mind that we're moving away from this colonial period. There aren't very many priests from Spain here, maybe 10 or so by the early to mid-1800s. And so this is a shift away from a very old system, and we really see that we are coming out of this idea of being Español or castizo and really witnessing the creation of Nuevo Mexicano culture and Nuevo Mexicanos, who are a mix of people from Mexico, native peoples, Spanish people from Mexico, mulattoes, people from Spain who come through Mexico and pick up cultural attributes there, and they mix with local Pueblo Indians and Genízaro Indians over the course of about
4 or 5 generations. In other words, they're different from the people who came with Oñate or Vargas 100 or 200 years before. So that's it for now. Thank you for joining me. This is New Mexico History in 10 minutes. I'm Robert Martinez, State Historian of New Mexico. Hasta pronto. Bye.